The air in the hallowed halls of Crestwood University was thick with the scent of old books, polished wood, and an unspoken sense of inherited prestige. For generations, Crestwood had been a bastion of academic excellence, a place where the brightest minds were supposedly nurtured. But for Marcus Thorne, a young black man from the inner city of Detroit, the air felt less like opportunity and more like a suffocating blanket of judgment. His scholarship, a rare full ride awarded through a new diversity initiative, was viewed by some as a handout, a quota fulfilled, rather than a testament to his extraordinary intellect. He carried the weight of those unspoken assumptions, but beneath it, a quiet fire burned, a profound, almost spiritual connection to the world of numbers. From the moment he stepped into Professor Alistair Finch's advanced calculus seminar, Marcus felt the chill. Finch, a man whose tweed jacket seemed permanently fused to his skin, possessed a reputation as a mathematical titan and an even larger one as an unyielding gatekeeper. He surveyed the class, his gaze lingering on Marcus for a beat too long, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Crucible," Finch began, his voice a dry rustle.
Ow.
"This is not a course for the faint of heart, nor for those who believe a passing grade is a birthright. Mathematics, true mathematics, demands rigor, discipline, and an innate understanding that few possess." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, then added, almost as an afterthought, "Some, of course, are simply not cut out for it." The implication hung heavy, a subtle jab aimed squarely at Marcus. He swallowed, his jaw tightening. He knew this game. He'd played it his whole life in different arenas with different players. But this was Crestwood, and the stakes felt higher. Days turned into weeks, and the subtle jabs became less subtle. In lectures, Finch would pose complex problems then. When Marcus raised his hand, he'd often bypass him, choosing a white student who might offer a less complete answer. When Marcus did get a chance, and his solutions were elegant and precise, Finch would offer a curt nod, devoid of the effusive praise he'd bestow upon others for far less. "Ah, Mr. Thorne, your method is unconventional," Finch remarked one afternoon, scrutinizing Marcus's perfectly correct derivation of a complex integral. "While the answer is correct, I prefer a more established approach. Speaks to a deeper understanding of foundational principles." Marcus bit back a retort. His unconventional method was often more efficient, more intuitive. It was the way his mind worked, seeing patterns and connections others missed. But he knew arguing was futile. The worst, however, was Professor Evelyn Reed. Reed, a sharp-featured woman with an intimidating intellect and an equally intimidating glare, taught linear algebra. She was Finch's intellectual sparring partner, and it seemed his co-conspirator in the quiet campaign against Marcus. One Tuesday, during a particularly grueling problem set review, Reed stood at the whiteboard, her marker squeaking as she wrote out a notoriously difficult proof involving eigenvalues. The class groaned collectively. "Anyone care to attempt this?" Reed challenged, her eyes scanning the room. They landed on Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, perhaps you'd like to enlighten us, given your unique perspective." A ripple of snickers went through the front row. Marcus felt a flush creep up his neck. He knew she wasn't offering him a chance. She was setting a trap. This proof was known to trip up even graduate students. He walked to the board, his heart thumping. He could feel the weight of their expectations, or rather their lack of them. Picked up the marker, his hand steady, despite the internal tremor. He began to write, not the standard textbook proof, but a more concise, elegant version he'd discovered himself while tinkering with the problem weeks ago. He moved with a fluid grace, his mind already 3 steps ahead of his hand. Filling the board with symbols and equations that flowed seamlessly, the snickers died. A few students leaned forward, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion, then to dawning comprehension. Even Professor Reed, initially impassive, found her brow furrowing, her gaze fixed on the board. When Marcus finished, he stepped back, the chalk dust clinging to his fingers. The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the scratching of pens as students furiously copied down his work. Reed cleared her throat. "That was certainly efficient, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice strained, a novel approach. Though, as Professor Finch often says, novelty does not always equate to rigor. It was a backhanded compliment, a desperate attempt to regain control. but Marcus saw the flicker of surprise, perhaps even grudging admiration, in her eyes. He had dodged the bullet, but the war was far from over. The true humiliation attempt came weeks later, orchestrated by Finch himself. It was during the annual Crestwood Mathematics Symposium, a prestigious event where faculty presented their research and select students were given the opportunity to showcase their burgeoning talents. This year, Finch had announced a special problem challenge, an unannounced, impromptu test of mathematical prowess. "We believe in pushing boundaries here at Crestwood," Finch declared from the podium, his voice booming through the auditorium. "And today, we shall push them further. I have prepared a problem, one that has stumped some of the finest minds in this department for decades. It is a variation of the Riemann hypothesis, a beast of a problem, simplified, of course. For this setting, but still profoundly complex." A collective gasp went through the audience of students and faculty. The Riemann hypothesis was one of the most famous unsolved problems in mathematics. Even a simplified variation was terrifying, Finch then announced, with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And for this challenge, I have selected a student at random to attempt it. Mr. Marcus Thorne, if you would be so kind as to join me on stage." Marcus felt a cold dread wash over him. At random was a lie. This was it, the public execution. He walked onto the stage, the spotlight blinding him, the faces in the audience a blur. He could feel the weight of every skeptical gaze, every whispered doubt. Finch handed him a single sheet of paper. On it, scrawled in Finch's precise hand, was the problem. It was indeed a variation of the Riemann hypothesis, involving the distribution of prime numbers and the zeros of the zeta function. It was designed to be intractable, to expose the limits of even the most gifted undergraduate. "You have 1 hour, Mr. Thorne," Finch announced, a timer appearing on the large screen behind them. "The whiteboard is yours. Show us what Crestwood's new generation is truly capable of." Marcus took a deep breath. He looked at the problem, and a strange calm settled over him. It wasn't just a series of numbers and symbols. It was a puzzle, a beautiful, intricate challenge. His mind, which had always seen the world in equations, began to hum. He picked up a marker. The first few lines were hesitant, standard notation. But then, as he delved deeper, his unique intuition took over. He began to write, not linearly, but in bursts, connecting disparate concepts, drawing on obscure theorems he'd devoured in dusty library tomes, and even inventing a few elegant shortcuts of his own. The audience watched, mesmerized. Professor Reed, sitting in the front row, leaned forward, her initial air of smug expectation slowly eroding into genuine astonishment. Other faculty members, initially dismissive, began to whisper, pointing at the board, their expressions a mixture of confusion and awe. Marcus wasn't just solving the problem, he was dissecting it, exploring its nuances, revealing layers of complexity and beauty that even Finch hadn't intended. He filled the first whiteboard, then moved to the second, his movements fluid, almost dance-like. He was in his element, lost in the pure, exhilarating logic of mathematics. Wrote about the critical line, the non-trivial zeros, the infinite series, weaving them into a tapestry of proof that was both rigorously sound and breathtakingly original. He used a technique he'd developed himself, a blend of complex analysis and number theory that simplified several steps that would normally require pages of dense calculation. The hour mark approached. Finch, who had been watching with a growing sense of unease, looked at the clock, then back at the board, his face pale. Marcus was nearing the conclusion, his hand flying across the whiteboard. With a flourish, he wrote the final line, a concise statement that encapsulated the entire proof. He put down the marker, his chest heaving slightly, but his eyes alight with the triumph of intellectual conquest. The auditorium was silent. Then, a single clap broke the stillness, followed by another and another, until the entire room erupted in a thunderous standing ovation. Students cheered, faculty members clapped, some even wiping away tears of sheer intellectual exhilaration. Professor Finch stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and profound embarrassment. The problem he had designed to expose Marcus's supposed inadequacy had instead revealed his own intellectual myopia. Professor Reed, however, was already on her feet, clapping with genuine enthusiasm, a rare smile gracing her lips. When the applause finally died down, Finch cleared his throat, his voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Thorne? That was extraordinary. Truly extraordinary." He looked at the board, then back at Marcus, a flicker of something akin to respect, perhaps even fear, in his eyes. "You have illuminated a path I had not considered." The moment was a turning point. The whispers in the halls changed from doubt to admiration. Marcus was no longer just the scholarship student. He was the math prodigy, the young man who had not only solved Finch's impossible problem, but had done so with a brilliance that humbled even the most seasoned professors. In the days that followed, Professor Finch's demeanor towards Marcus shifted dramatically. He began to treat him not just as a student, but as a peer, engaging him in deep mathematical discussions. Even seeking his input on his own research, Professor Reed became a staunch advocate, often defending Marcus's unconventional methods and encouraging him to pursue his unique insights. Marcus's journey at Crestwood was far from over, but the path ahead was now clearer, illuminated by the light of his own undeniable genius. He had faced the prejudice, endured the attempts at humiliation, and emerged not just unscathed, but triumphant. He had proven that true brilliance transcends all barriers, that sometimes the most profound lessons are learned not in the classroom, but on a brightly lit stage with a piece of chalk and an impossible problem. He was Marcus Thorne, and he was finally, truly seen.